So the question is, are you a blind sheep? You may be, right? So this is what a sheep looks like. And it's bad enough being called a sheep, right? Because I don't think any one of us wants to be a sheep. And there's probably many of you who've called other people sheep, right? But worse than that, I think, is to be a blind sheep, right? Where you don't even know where you're going or where you're going at. You're following something, but it's being done even in a more worse way. So I think a blind sheep is probably worse than just sheep. So the conversation I want to have is, I use the word systems, and the question is, what is a system, right? What are systems? So let's look at some of these systems, okay? But if you look at this over here, this is actually the back of a watch. And you can see the back of this watch has many, many parts to it, and the parts are all interconnected, right? So a watch is not just any one part. It has all these parts interconnected in the right way, and what then emerges is a system called a watch. So basically, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So a system, it's important to remember, is not just a bunch of parts, but it's the interconnection of those parts. So that's the back of a watch. If you look at this diagram, what is this? Some of you may know, some of you may not know. If you've taken the class, you probably do know what this is. This is actually millions of parts put together. It's really a system. And this system is a space shuttle engine. And every part has to be in the right location. And when all those parts are in the right location, you get something that can lift off tons of matter off the ground and break the Earth's inertia to go into space. If you think about, even if one of these parts is not connected right, it can blow up. And that's what happened when the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up. There's something called the O-rings, and they were never properly tested for cold weather. And the solid rocket boosters, the seams bled and the space shuttle blew up. But it's really, again, about the interconnections, right? So all these parts have got to be put together at the right location. This is also a system. So again, just to review, this is a system, this is a system, this is a system. This is actually a city. A city is an interconnection of many, many subsystems, right? The buildings, the roads, the parks, the alleyways, all of these connected together in a way, what emerges is something called a city. Many, many different interconnections. You have city planners who build these systems. And based on how you connect the roads, you can have wealthy areas or poor areas, etc. But this too is a system. Here's another system at a more microscopic level. This is the cell. The cell is also a system. Many parts interconnected together, and you have 300 different cells in your body. Some cells are red blood cells, other blood cells are white blood cells, other cells are epithelial cells, endothelial cells. And what makes a cell different? Well, they all have a nucleus, they all have membranes, but it's how the particular molecular pathways emerge in these systems and how they're connected. So based on how you do the connection, you can get many different kinds of cells. But again, this is a system. This is also a system, right? A transit system. So look at this. These are all different kinds of systems. You'd have to be a watchmaker to understand this, an aeronautical engineer, a city planner, a cell biologist, or a transportation person. All different kinds of systems. Another system, a healthcare system, okay? The question is, I want to pose to you, how do you actually understand systems? Do you have to be a watchmaker to understand the watch? Do you have to be an aeronautical engineer? Do you have to be a city planner? Imagine if you could really look at the system as it is, and then you could actually understand, oh, this system, this is the real problem in this system. Here's a real solution, which goes beyond left and right. So that would be the ideal way. And that's what I'm committed to teaching. That's why you have the little ticker running. So we've created a whole way that we train people all over the world to see things as they are. And we call it our Warrior Scholar program. You can go join it. But today, what I want to talk to you about is that we live in a world where we're not trained to look at the world as systems. Yet we live in this modern 21st century where everything around us is a system. Healthcare systems, election systems, immune systems. But if we don't have a way to look at these systems as they are, we're going to be misled. We're going to be fighting among each other. One way to look at systems is to really understand system science. So some of you ask me, what is the science of systems, Dr. Shiva? Well, the science of systems is a way where you can actually have the tools to really think about systems. The opposite of system science is to really look at the world from a reductionist way. Reductionism. So reductionism is the opposite of a systems thinking. So let's look at what reductionism looks like. And it's really the blind, it's a dumb way to look at the world. And those in power do not want us looking at the world in a systems way, because you're going to be able to be your own teacher, your own guru, your own solutions provider. You're going to see things as they are. And there is a way to look at the world as systems. But the opposite way is to look at the world in a blind way, and it's called the reductionist way. And the best way to understand reductionism is through this very, very important story. And by the way, this story goes back to about 1500 BC. It actually goes back to the Indian Vedas. It goes back to, in fact, a very ancient sage, Thirumalur, who was in India and who talked about that you can be blind and you can see the elephant like blind men. And what he was referring to was, if you look at the elephant, it's a very complex system, right? It's got a tusk, it's got a tail, it's got, the trunk, it's got legs. It's a whole system. You can look at it as parts, or you can look at it as a whole system. The blinded way of looking at the elephant goes to the story that was told many, many years later, where a king brought 6 blind men and they were all asked to see what they saw, right? Because saw meaning in double quotes. And this story tells it well. So here's the actual system. So consider the elephant being like the whole system, right? The watch or the space shuttle or the city or the cell, the entire system or the healthcare system. If you take a reductionist approach, what you see, you become the blind sheep. And in this case, we're looking at 6 blind men. So these 6 blind men were called in to look at this elephant, okay? Which is a whole system, okay? So one of the blind men looks at the ear and he thinks the elephant is a fan, right? Because the elephant's ears move and he's convinced the elephant, to him, the elephant is the fan. He doesn't see the whole system. He sees it as a fan. The blind man who sees a tail thinks the elephant is a rope. To him, he's convinced that the elephant is a rope. Again, a reductionist viewpoint. He does not see the entire elephant. He just sees the rope because that's what he feels. The blind man who bumps into the feet of the elephant thinks, oh, this is a tree. He thinks it's an oak tree. The blind man who bumps into the side of the elephant, he thinks it's a wall. He's convinced it's a wall because it's big. He thinks it's a wall. The blind man who touches the tusk thinks, oh, it's a spear. And then the blind man who touches the trunk is convinced it's a snake. So you see what I'm saying? Each one is blinded and they're just seeing parts of this large system. They have a blinded view of reality. And all of these guys arguing amongst each other, right? The guy who sees a tusk says, this is definitely a snake. The guy who touches a tusk says it's a spear. And the guy argues with the other guy who says, this elephant is a tree. The other guy says it's a fan, a wall, and a rope. You get the idea, right? So this is a non-systems approach, and this is what the left and the right do, right? They take every issue and they take a left-wing view or a right-wing view, and then they have working people taking a Democrat position, a Republican position, and people are fighting among each other. And as long as people fight, 2 things happen. Those in power maintain power, and more importantly, we never really address the root cause issues. We don't see the elephant. We don't see the space shuttle. We just see pieces of it, right? So I hope everything's clear here, okay? We need to see things as they are. So if you go back to what I'm talking about here, so we don't see what ends up happening is this is what you see, okay? You don't see the elephant, you see this, okay? So when all these blind guys get together, they're all arguing among each other and they don't really see an elephant. What they see in their view is a oak tree on top of which is a wall with 2 fans, 2 spears, a snake hanging off of it, and a rope. It's absolutely absurd, right? But this is what happens on even political issues, on major issues of our time. The news doesn't represent the whole system because they're not systems guys. The politicians don't study systems. The lawyers don't study systems. Engineers do, but engineers never get a voice. Working people do. Plumbers understand systems. Electricians understand systems. Mothers understand systems. But the people leading the narratives promote this to us, right? They don't promote the actual elephant, right? What they promote to us is this. And this is where the problem is, okay? All right. So how do we get beyond this? How do we see things as they are, beyond left and right? That's what we want, right? If we're serious, working people have the same interests. Those who actually have to solve problems see the same things. But those who don't have to solve problems never have to see the real issues. They just have to run for office, lie to people, get one people to be on the left side and other people to be on the right side. And the problems are never solved. And so this is a recurrent process of why nothing ever changes for working people. But if we want to see things as they are, and if we want to go beyond left and right, how do we do that? Okay. Well, we want to see the whole watch, not just the parts. We want to see the whole space shuttle's engine. We want to see the city for what it is, not just any one part of it. We want to see the entire cell, right? If we just focus on the nucleus or we just focus on the membrane, you never solve the real disease. We want to see the whole system. So how do we see things as they are beyond left and right? And let me give some examples. We really want to go beyond pro or anti, right? Isn't that what we want? So how do we do that? Well, if you remember, if you take something like another system, if we look at really something like the healthcare system, right? Or this is another way of looking at the healthcare system, a very complex system. Most people don't have an opportunity to study the entire healthcare system. But if you take a systems approach, if you really have a chance, and many of you know that that's the approach we take in our movement, and that's the way that I'd like to present a lot of the knowledge in many of the past videos, but I want to educate all of you how to do that. But if you take a system approach to the healthcare system, what do you actually find? Well, you find that the real issue is that there's people called GPOs, group purchasing organizations, and pharmacy broker managers who are really the middlemen in this whole system. And that's the real issue, that they increase the cost. And you can go look at one of the videos I've talked about. But what I'm saying is when you take a systems approach, you find out this is the real problem. There's middlemen who increase the cost. And then you find out the real solution is to eliminate GPOs and PBM. Okay? Another system, which I've talked extensively about, done research about for my own campaign, the election systems, right? Very complex systems. What you find is a real problem is we have poor chain of custody. We have a flawed signature verification process, and there's actually no enforcement of laws. And the real solution is we need to ensure chain of custody from the time a ballot comes in. We need trained forensic document examiners who actually do signature verification, and we need to enforce existing laws, right? Real problem, real solution. Another system, the immune system. The immune system is a very complex system, but you find out that what's being promoted is, we really need to go beyond vax and anti-vax. We need to go beyond one size fits all medicine. The real issue is the immune system is complex. We need to have the right medicine for the right person at the right time. We need to build community and to boost immunity. And these are the things that our movement spoke about, 2-3 years ago. We're the ones who talked about the real problem and the real solution. And then opportunists came later and they then try to make money off the whatever the issue was, but too little too late. So the point is, if we take a systems approach and we see the whole elephant as it is, if we see the whole system, we can always identify the real problem and the real solution. That is the power of the science of systems. This is why through every talk I do, I keep telling you guys, please take this systems course. Please take the systems course. I'm giving you a scholarship. It's not to benefit me, but I've realized that the only way that we can win this is to raise people's consciousness on every one of these problems, be it, the problem of, as I talk about, the immune system or the election systems or the healthcare systems. We need to understand what the real problem is and the real solution. We need to understand again what the real problem is and the real solution. Again, in the immune system, the real problem, the real solution. Now, if we can do that and I can educate you to see things as they are beyond left and right, guess what? We don't really need to be worried about who's in office per se, because all of you will have the tools at the local level to really, for your own community, for yourself, to see things as they are. Okay? And that's what the real goal is.